All right, so we'll get started. Basically, like the reason that I wanted to do this Zoom, it's pretty quick and easy. It's not going to be super long, but I wanted to go into what's going to happen in 2021, or at least what I speculate is going to happen in 2021, so people have like a basic idea of like what they should be thinking about and considering with regards to like student loan management, because we have a new president, whether the current president concedes or not. And so, when that time comes, there's going to be some different administration, that comes in, and there's going to be a lot of changes with regards to how they handle student loans. So some of the things that's really been talked about lately, and there's a lot of buzz. So most people already know that like Elizabeth Warren, she's been pioneering for like the cancellation of student loans for as long as I can remember. She's very progressive, very left, so to speak. And, one of the things that she kind of said to Biden was like, hey, you can cancel student loans, period, but at least $50,000 per borrower, up to $50,000 should be canceled. That would like literally help the economy right now. Like it's something that can be achieved right now, which is very true. $50,000 per person would get rid of like 95% of, the debt. The average student has about $37,000 in student loan debt, borrower. So that gets rid of a large chunk of debt for a lot of people. Now, obviously people that have graduate degrees or professional, doctors, attorneys, so forth, they're going to have more debt. But even then, $50,000 in debt is a huge discount. And it really helps. That's probably just the interest that's accrued over the last few years for a lot of people that have a large amount of debt, but it really helps the economy. However, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. So if I go off of my own knowledge and being in the industry for as long as I have, here's what I think is going to happen. So I think what they'll probably do is try to cancel $10,000 in student loans per borrower. And they'll do that under the coronavirus relief program. So going into 2021, we'll probably see about that amount actually get canceled for most borrowers, which is still, $10,000. So for those borrowers that have only $10,000 or, $20,000, that's a pretty decent chunk of money. Even for those that have $30,000, you're knocking off a third of their debt, which is decent. Biden also discussed potentially doing $10,000 in forgiveness, basically, over the years for those that participate in national and community services. So we might see something like that happen at some point. Where, we're actually getting, a decent chunk of money for those people that are in community environments and community service environments, and making sure that those people are getting, some type of relief as well. So I think that's pretty big. So that's, so those are things that we really want to consider, because at the end of the day, even $10,000 is something that I think we'll anticipate happening. So that's kind of my opinion. Ultimately what really happens, we really never know for sure, what the government's going to come out and say, as far as what they're really going to do or not do. But if I had to take a guess, I would say expect $10,000 in forgiveness under the current coronavirus relief. Now, another thing that I'm thinking is very potential is that what we've seen thus far is that, for most people that have student loans, they understand that student loans cannot be, you can't go and file bankruptcy on student loans. So because you can't file bankruptcy on student loans, a lot of people that have student loans that just literally just are never going to be able to pay have had to suffer through them. And you see that even all the way up until people are in retirement, where they're still paying student loans out of their Social Security benefits. So that's really, really a big thing. And a lot of people have disputed saying, hey, if you can get bankruptcy on credit cards and you can get bankruptcy on houses and you get bankruptcy on, car notes, you should be able to get bankruptcy on student loans, especially if there's a valid reason. So let's say you went to a for-profit university, you really never got anything out of that education. It was one of those like Everest schools or IT techs or something like that. And, it should be something that, you're able to file bankruptcy on. Like, hey, I'm not going to get anything from this. Like, I'm not going to, this education didn't serve me, so I should be able to get bankruptcy. I think there would be talks about that going into 2021 from Biden and the administration. And if Biden's, smart, he'll listen to Warren when it comes to what she believes is going to be really imperative for most, borrowers. So I think that's really understanding that, those type of things are going to be important for going forward, because ultimately, like, I think a lot of times people don't understand that like student loans is such a big burden for most people that debt overshadows their ability to buy a house, to have kids, to get a loan, to have good credit, there's so much that it impacts. And if we can alleviate some of that debt, it's going to make a big difference economically for everybody. For people that own businesses, you can't actually sell your services or sell your products if the majority of society, 44 million people, have student loan debt. It becomes a deterrent for them to buy what you have while they struggle to pay student loans. So I think, if they really look at it, I think they'll really understand that change has to happen. So this is kind of something like that I'll go into for those that haven't listened to me before and don't really understand some of the current options, because in the interim of all of that, so in the interim of recognizing that, yes, there's a possibility of cancellation of student loans. No, it's not going to happen day one, the minute Biden takes his place as president. It's not going to happen. The way that Biden is doing it is that we can anticipate that he's going to wait for Congress to make some final decisions. He's not going to be as quick to do executive orders as we've seen Trump do, because Biden's more a team player. So he's going to go to Congress and say, hey, this is what I'm proposing. I want you guys to sign off on it. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be something that they're going to be like, oh, yep, here you go for it. So in the interim of that, people that have student loans, the CARES Act, those people that have not had to pay student loans right now, they're going to have to pay student loans. So it's important to understand that under CARES Act, that ends December 31st. That means January, most of these companies, like, they're already ready. Like, they're like, yo, January comes, they're ready for you to make that first payment. So that's really important to recognize, because those payments are going to come due. And so people still have to understand, like, what am I going to do while I'm waiting for potential forgiveness? So that'll be something that, is going to be something that we have to consider. So some of the things that I've talked about in the past, and I think a lot of people probably know, but I want to reiterate, because when I talk to potential clients or talk to people that have student loans, I've determined that people still don't really understand these repayment programs and how they work together. I get people that are like, oh, well, I think I'm in this program, or I might be in that program, but these are really important to know, because this is your money. Your money is going out, and you need to know why, and you need to know how much you're going to spend. So these are kind of the different options that we currently have. And I simplified it. I didn't go into detail about every single option, but these are like the main ones. So of course, standard options, we have graduated options. A graduated option would be interest only for 2 years and then into a standard. I've talked to people that didn't realize that they were in a graduated. They just were like, oh, my payment was low for 2 years, and now my payment's so much higher. Yeah, you were only paying interest for 2 years. Not necessarily a bad thing if you plan it properly, but it's a very bad thing if you didn't realize that your balance was going nowhere. So that's important to know. Consolidated basically is, if you have a standard payment that's a 10-year, but you can consolidate and get a 20-year, then of course your payment's going to be lower. So that's really important to understand because that can make a big difference. So that's really, really important. If you don't consolidate it, but you want a term that's longer and you want to make interest-only payments for the first year, you can do an extended graduated option. So that's a big one because that means you don't have to necessarily consolidate your loans, especially for somebody who maybe shouldn't. Maybe you took out loans when they were like at an all-time low. You wouldn't necessarily need to consolidate them because when you consolidate, you bump to the next eighth of a percentage point. So maybe you recognize like, okay, consolidation is not the best option, or you've talked to me and you're like, consolidation is not the best option. Extended graduated might be a good option if you're like, okay, I just need a little bit of time to pay a lower amount, very, very low amount, and then I'm going to go back to something more standard. And then we have the IBR plan, income-based repayment. You got your pay-as-you-earn, and you got your repay. And those are all different based on your needs. So, for example, IBR, that would allow for essentially you paying 20% of your discretionary income, but pay as you earn and repay would be 10% of your discretionary income. So automatically those two are better. But repay is not as good necessarily because you can't get forgiveness on repay until 25 years on grad loans. Where pay as you earn, you can get 20 years on grad loans. So that's a difference, as well as the fact that if you're married, even if you file separately from your spouse, repay still requires your spouse's income. So that's really big to know. That's important to understand because a lot of times people don't file their taxes jointly for various reasons. So you should definitely understand like how that works. And that's something that, of course, at the end of this, I'm going to leave time for questions where you can ask me like, hey, I'm under this plan. Is this best for me? Or you can contact me at a later point to find out. But some of the research that I did, when I was doing my dissertation for my doctorate, is I came across this research from Ostrowski. And one of the things that he talked about when he kind of reviewed student loans is that there needs to be an easier path for figuring out like what the repayment options are. What happened is in 2007, they started creating all these different repayment programs. And then in 2012, they made more. And then 2014, repay came out and it became more and more complicated. So, and what I have found is that the government almost always puts you in repay, even when it's not the best option. One of my most recent clients, I completed the documentation for her. I submitted everything. I made sure that she perfectly qualified for pay as you earn. I made sure that it stated that on the documentation. And guess what they did? They put her in repay. I'm like, where did you even get that? That box was not checked. So, but that's because they recognize that repay for them is a better option. So which one are they going to try to select for you? They're going to select for them one that's most beneficial for their particular needs. That's important to understand. So problems with repayment plans. So like I mentioned, government tends to put borrowers in the wrong repayment plan, even when requested. So you'll always see that. And then most people just aren't really aware of the subtle differences in the plans because they seem very subtle, but long-term, if you understand like, okay, this is going to cost X, Y, and Z, long-term, you can kind of see like where the repayment programs really can make a big difference. If you're paying 20% of your discretionary income under IBR versus 10% of your discretionary income under pay as you earn, that's double. You're paying double. And sometimes people don't qualify for pay as you earn under their current situation, but there's tricks on how to qualify. So a lot of times you might call your student loan company, say it's Navient, for example, and say, hey, I'm paying $300 a month and I need a lower payment. They might be like, oh, well, you're in the lowest payment program. You might be in the lowest payment program currently, but it doesn't mean that you can't get a lower payment program by making some adjustments. Consolidation might be an option, where we take the loans from the FFELP lender to the Department of Education, and now you qualify for pay-as-you-earn. Now your payment is half of what you're paying. So things like that people just don't understand, because why would you, right? I mean, I do this 40 hours a week, so I know it like the back of my hand. I've been doing it a long time, but the average consumer isn't going to know that. And then another big issue, and this is one example of an issue of many issues, is that, as you see there, so U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau accused Navient, and Navient originally was Sallie Mae in 2014, of systemically and illegally failing borrowers at every stage of repayment. Systemically and illegally. I mean, this is serious stuff. So what we're saying here is the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is already telling us that they know that Navient has been systemically and illegally failing borrowers at every stage of repayment. That's big. Another issue that happens right here, the Bureau said Navient often failed to allocate payments to borrowers' accounts, steered people into more expensive forbearance options when they could not make their payments, and obscured information that could lead to lower monthly payments. These are serious accusations. And this is just one of the companies. There's other companies that have exactly the same particular situation. Fed Loans, Nelnet, Great Lakes. So Navient is, just one of the bigger ones. They have the majority of the debt. They're servicing the majority of the debt, but these other companies have been all accused of the same thing. So what does that mean? That means that what happens a lot of times, and what I get a lot of times, is people saying, oh, well, my loans are with Navient. I'm just gonna call Navient. Navient's gonna help me out. Okay. All right, maybe, but if the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is saying that they're illegally failing borrowers at every stage of the repayment, what would make any person that has loans with Navient or any of these other companies comfortable enough to say, oh, they're going to be able to help me out? You have to take some responsibility of how you handle your own debt, because the companies, they're not designed to do that. So it's not going to happen. So the more you know, the better. That's really, really important. Most people, I think, are aware of the fact that as of now, the CARES Act is going to be ending December 31st. So any accounts that people have that are currently postponed are going to be due sometime in January, maybe February, depending on your cycle, your student loan payment cycle. That also means that anybody that's been garnished or delinquent, these collection companies that have been very quiet because they've been legally required to be, but very quiet, are going to come out the woodworks, and they're going to start asking to collect on that debt. And I think they're going to come back full force, because they've had all this time to gather data, to find out who's delinquent, to be able to reach out to the IRS, to find out who's working, who's not working, to be able to go in and say, all right, we're going to now garnish your wages because I know you have a job. Or we're going to start collecting on this debt because you've been, 60 months past due, or whatever the case may be. So that's really important to know, is that now, so we have a month and a half, give or take, about a month and a half to make a really, really smart plan on how to best handle student loans. Whether that be the type of payment you put yourself in, or making sure you're out of default, or doing some rehabilitation. That's going to be big. Another thing that's really big that I don't think I've talked about too much, I sent out, I did a blog, and for those that don't know, I do have a blog on my website, studentloanmanagement.info. There is a blog there. You can go in, you're going to find all types of information about what's going on with student loans. But one of the big ones that we found out about before COVID was that all those companies, those fraudulent companies like Fed Loans, Navient, Great Lakes, you see here, they are not listed because their contracts are going to be expired. So the Department of Education has said, hey, we're not working with them anymore they've, they put a bad taste in the mouth of borrowers. They're not really doing their job. They're supposed to be putting borrowers in the best repayment option. That's not really what's happening, because they've been collecting, fees when you're delinquent or late. They're making money off of this. So they've almost been forced into hiring new servicing companies. These are going to be the new servicing companies. All right. So you might have heard of Ed Financial. They have been around for a while. They're kind of still a servicing company, where they're going to be picked up to really be doing a lot more. FH Cannon Associates, they were a collection company, because I've dealt with them with clients that had loans that were in collections, and they're now being picked up to be a servicing company. So that'll be interesting how they interact with clients, because those of you that might have had collection companies call you on your student loans, they don't treat you very well. So there's something to be concerned with. Maximus Federal Services, I've never even heard of them. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they come from. As time goes on and we get closer to the change, I'll do some more digging to figure out where they came from, but we'll see what happens. And then Missouri Higher Education, they've been around. They're MOHELA for short, so they've been around for a little while. Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation, Trellis. Texas Guaranteed has been around for a while, but more as a guarantor agency, not as a servicing company. So it'll be interesting to see the transition. The reason why it's important, because you're probably like, who cares? The reason why it's important, though, is because anytime there's a big transition like this, there's errors, there's mistakes. Anybody that's listening to this now or listens to it later in the recording needs to understand that it's very possible that there's going to be some serious mistakes that happen in your account. We'd like to think that all the information gets transferred appropriately from one company into another, but I've been in this industry long enough to know that that's not what happens. There was a huge transfer of servicers back in 2007, and trust me, it did not go smoothly. So you need to know what your balances are, what your interest accrual is, what your rates are, whether you need to consolidate, not consolidate, because when this change happens, it's going to be a pretty big deal. So I want everybody to be kind of aware of that as well. So in the meantime, because again, like I said, this wasn't going to be a very long Zoom, I just wanted to kind of go over some of the current changes. In the meantime, these are basics. These are things that I'm sure you probably already know, but keep your account in good standing. Make sure that you're at least good, like your payments aren't past due. As we go through transitioning, make sure you're in good standing, know what your balances are, know what your rates are, know who holds your loans. If you qualify for forgiveness or you think you're going to, find out for sure how many months have you already thus far put into qualifying for forgiveness, because I don't want it to get moved to another company and they say, oh, well, we don't see that you've already did 7 months of forgiveness. We don't see that because it wasn't transferred to us. So, oh, well. So record keeping is going to be really big going into this year. Some companies are starting to show transitioning to the new servicers, but as a whole, I don't expect that we'll see full transitions until closer to probably June, in anywhere between June and October of next year. So we have some time, but don't wait till the last minute. I mean, don't take my word for it. I mean, it could happen sooner than that. Select the correct repayment program in the meantime. If you're not sure, then of course, contact me. Let's figure out exactly what that should look like. And then of course, get out of default if needed. Try to get out of default now so that going into January, February, you're back in good standing. And so those are some of the things that I think are going to be really, really big. And then also qualifying for forgiveness. So if you think you qualify for forgiveness, let's do it now and then record that information so that, again, when the servicer takes over, that information is reflected. So if anybody has any questions in the interim about that, let's go over those questions. And then of course, I will post this. So if if anybody has questions, you know, at the time of posting, I can of course go over then as well. This will get posted probably by 8 o'clock this Eastern time this evening. But if anybody has questions, now is the time.
All right, I do have a quick question here.
Sure.
So, well, actually, two. I know you mentioned in the beginning where you were saying about like there were how you were thinking that they were going to offer forgiveness if you're in like a community service or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What would be considered in that category?
So it's a great question. The government hasn't specified exactly yet. So my understanding of it would be anybody that works like any type of community service work. Like say, for example, I think our friend Dana, like she went to the Amazon and she did some service over there. Like that would be considered community service. Maybe you work part-time at a shelter, might be considered community service. We don't have any specifics on like how many hours, like we don't know yet
Right.
exactly. It could also mean kind of the same as what it's been with regards to public service. But they didn't word it the same. But public service would be somebody that works at a nonprofit, 501c3, somebody that works at, say, a nurse at a hospital, a state hospital or government hospital, police officer, teachers. So those are public service. So it could be that. So it's really dependent. We don't have enough information for me to speculate or give you a straight answer. But hopefully, like once Biden takes office, they'll tell us more, like we'll know more. But right now it's kind of up in the air.
Okay. And so another question that I had is that I redid my income-based repayment
Okay.
plan
Mm-hmm.
while we're on like the hiatus from payments right now.
Good.
And they sent me what my new payment would be.
Okay, good, good.
But however, it's with Great Lakes. So, like you said, they're going to be one of the companies that's kind of going away.
Yep, exactly.
So, will that do you know if that will translate to the new servicer, or
So
will I have to redo it then?
so you're not supposed to have to redo it. What I would suggest though is the statement that they gave you that said, hey, yep, this is your payment amount, this is when it starts, just hold on to it. So
Yeah.
what happens now, more than likely your servicer change won't happen until you've already been in that payment program. But I would definitely hold on to it because I'm always concerned about transition. So you'll want to be like, hey, I'm supposed to have this payment from January 3rd to, you know, January 2nd of next year. You know, here's my document, just in case they
Yeah.
come back and they're like, oh, we want you to redo it. Like, you shouldn't have to, because keep in mind, there's still Department of Education loans. So even though the servicer is changing, the lender is the same. The government is the lender. So the lender should not require duplication of documentation. But I don't trust them.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly why I was asking that, because
yeah,
I'm kind of suspicious too.
right,
Like,
exactly. I don't trust, because it was a disaster in 2007 when they tried to make those transitions. It's a nightmare. It's probably still not been rectified. So like just as like safeguard yourself, just hold on to everything. Hold on to
yeah,
it so you have proof, and they can't dispute it. Like I'm like, you know, here's my government document that says that this is my payment. I've already done everything I need to do. You already have my tax information. I've already supplied you with everything. I'm done.
yeah,
That should be what
exactly.
happens. But yeah, you should be fine. But yeah, so if the statement came through like on your online system, download it and save it on your computer.
Okay, yeah, and I have the email they sent me also, so
Perfect. Yep, exactly.
save
So
that
yep,
because
just save it, hold on to it, and then that way that's your proof of like, hey, I've already done what I'm supposed to do.
yeah, exactly. I just didn't want it to be like, oh, they're telling me to pay like, oh, pay this $100, and then all of a sudden it's like, here, pay this $1,500. Like, no,
And
that's
I
not gonna
bet you
happen.
they will. They'll
Yeah,
be the first
exactly.
one to be like, hey, okay, we're the new servicer. Here's your bill. And you're like, wait, what? No, no,
Yeah,
no.
exactly. Be
That'll be
like, is that for the year or
right. Yeah,
instead?
like
Yeah,
like, this doesn't add up. Absolutely, they will do that. I would bet money that they send you a bill that's incorrect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that'd be the thing. So the key is, like, ultimately, making sure that you have everything, like, there ready for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All
Exactly.
right. The last question that I had is about what is the like the time frame that they have for forgiveness on like the income based repayment? Is there?
Yeah, so there's technically two different time frames. So there is forgiveness based on a 10-year time frame for those in public sector, 501c3,
Yeah.
teachers, anybody like that, nonprofit. And then there's a 20-year forgiveness. That's under, I don't want to say it's under IBR, because not necessarily. It's really more under pay as you earn, if you're under pay as you earn program,
Mm.
or repay program if they're undergrad loans. So if you're in IBR, you might want to double check to see, because there's two different IBRs. This is where it gets complicated. This is the reason why Ostrowski was like, yo, this is why people make mistakes. There's two different IBRs. There's the old IBR, and then what they call the new IBR. Um,
Yeah.
so if you're under the old IBR, you don't get forgiveness for 25 years. If you're under the new IBR, you get forgiveness in 20 years. 5 years is a big difference.
Yeah.
So you'd really want to double check with the company and be like, which IBR plan am I under? And what percentage are you charging me? Are you charging me a payment based on 10% of discretionary, or are you charging me a payment based on 20% of discretionary? That'll be your big difference as to, like, which one they actually have you in. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's important to know, because if they have you in 20% discretionary, you're paying double what you should be paying.
Yeah.
And you'll want to make adjustments to your plan, which you can still do. So payments aren't due until January-ish, February-ish. You can make adjustments, and send in new documentation to make that change. And I
Okay.
would do it while you're still under zero interest accrual, because you don't want to wait until you go into repayment to change it, because they're going to essentially charge you on it, to make that adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So yeah, so that's really big. That's a big, that's a big difference. Um,
And I'd imagine also you want to kind of, like you said, kind of keep track of how long you've been in that program before the transfer.
Absolutely, yeah. Because if you're anticipating, even under, a standard forgiveness of 20 years, if you're anticipating getting forgiveness in 20 years, and you haven't kept your documentation showing that you've been paying under IBR or repay or pay as you earn or ICR, they can always come back and be like, oh, well, we don't know what Navient did, and we don't know. We're the
Yeah.
new
Exactly.
company. So I mean, I would definitely like hold on to everything now, and like print everything out or save it on your computer that says, hey, starting 2017, I've been income-based repayment every month. That's 36 months towards my 20 years. Might seem
Yeah.
like a long time, but I get clients that still call me that are 68 years old that are paying student loans out of their Social Security. 20 years still comes around. But at a young person like, us, like our age, at least you'll be done, before they start taking it out of your Social
Yeah.
Security benefits.
Hopefully.
Right, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So like how would I get that? Is that something that I can just go on like the Great Lakes and find that information, or will I need to like call them for that?
So technically, yeah, it should be on the Great Lakes website, but I don't really like their website that much. You should be able to go into like your payment history, and it should show you like how long you've been in that payment program and what those payments were. But I don't know 100%. Like their website, it's so hard to like find anything on Great Lakes site. So what I would suggest, if you don't see it in there, then I would call them or even email them. Go on your website and do the contact us and email them and specifically say, I need to know how many qualifying payments I have made under income-based repayment, or I would say income-driven repayment. Be specific.
Yeah.
Because income-driven encompasses IBR, ICR, pay-as-you-earn, repay. They're all
Yeah.
the same. And get them to send you a breakdown. That would be ideal. That way you know what it is. So you have that coming all the way up until 2021. And then going forward, do the same thing. Right before, you get notification that the servicer is changing, I would ask for another document.
Okay.
Proof.
All right. Yep.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah. Like you never want to leave it up to them to like do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Perfect. All right. Any other questions? Hi, Denise. I see you jumped on. If you have any questions for me, we did go over some of the changes, regulatory changes. So by all means, chime in, ask me now, and then that way I can try to help you out.
I might have to, since I jumped on so late. Hey, everybody. I'll probably have to like hit you up privately, and then you can kind of fill me in on what you spoke about because I don't want to take up everybody else's time.
It's okay. Yeah, I understand. Questions are good because I will post this. Later, we can always talk about it later. I think, one of the keys that I'll briefly mention is that, we do know that now with Biden, we can kind of anticipate some possible forgiveness that'll come out of this whole coronavirus situation. So $10,000 is expected. I suspect that he'll do $10,000, but we'll see what happens. But I'll definitely post this. You can always go on and watch the post, and then by all means hit me up at any point.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, if that's all the questions, then I think we're good. Most people probably know my contact information. It is again, just in case. Website is studentloanmanagement.info. My phone number is there listed, the 813-528-1102. I can also be emailed at gdobson@degreesofsuccessinfo.com. But yeah, so it's just really like, ultimately the key is understanding what these regulation changes mean to you and staying on top of it. So that's really, really big. And then of course, those people that are clients of mine already, you're automatically going to be handled as far as like emails, and I'll reach out. I'll make sure that you know exactly what needs to happen going forward. So that's part of what I do as a service, is any documentation that's necessary, any prep work, any communication with the servicing company, anything that's needed, I will automatically provide that to you, so you won't have to question what to do. So that's part of, one of the reasons why a lot of people like to sign up for services. So if anybody's interested in finding out more about that, by all means, go to the website, the studentloanmanagement.info, click on contact, click on appointment, schedule a time. We can chat about it and see, how I could possibly fit some of those needs where you don't have to try to go it alone and figure it all out. So, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. A lot of good stuff in the pipeline for 2021. So fingers crossed it all goes smoothly, but I have a feeling it's going to go a lot better than it has. So something to look forward to with regards to help with this student loan crisis. So everybody have a great night. Be safe. Continue to be safe in the midst of the pandemic. And I look forward to talking to everybody soon. Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.